What is going on, everybody? The 2025 NFL Draft is just a few weeks away, and finally, I have Mock Draft 2.0 here. I apologize for the inconsistency with draft content over the last couple of weeks, but I've got some fun stuff planned here through the month of April leading into the draft. Today, we're going to go over 2 rounds with trades, so we'll have a lot to cover, and keep in mind it is a predictive mock draft, what I think will happen, not necessarily what I would do if I was these teams. We will have one of those mock drafts later in the cycle. So let's not waste any time. We've got 64 picks to go over. Let's get it rolling. We'll start with the Titans at 1, and it's not really a very well-kept secret that they're going to pick Cam Ward here. This seems like a lock at this point, and it's probably what they should do. I think he's the top quarterback prospect in the class, and it's no secret the Titans need help at this position. During my first mock draft, which was around a month ago, this was around the time when people were trying to overthink it here. They were trying to put Abdul Carter in this slot, and I was saying no. It's always been Cam Ward. It always will be Cam Ward, and here we are in April. It's going to be Cam Ward. They have not kept their cards close to their chest. They have made it pretty much publicly clear that this is what they're going to do, and it's what they should do. It's a little sad that we're not going to have a suspenseful number 1 pick, but I think it's the correct pick for the Titans to go out and get their franchise quarterback. The draft really starts at number 2 with the Cleveland Browns, and I would say I'm in the minority with this prediction. It seems like a lot of them have them passing on a quarterback. I think if that's the case, I would think they would draft Travis Hunter at this spot, but I actually believe they will pick Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback out of Colorado. He's being mocked all over the first round. It seems like a lot of people have a lot of question marks with his game, and I understand it. I don't think he's a number 2 overall pick worthy prospect, but when you're a quarterback, you naturally get bumped up. And as I look at the Browns situation, they haven't really made the position better this offseason. They added Kenny Pickett. I mean, what's that going to do? They did re-sign Myles Garrett. It seemed like he seemed confident with what they were going to do at the quarterback position. The Browns, of course, are planning to build a new stadium, and it seems like they're going about their offseason very confidently, which leads me to believe that they really like what they're going to do at quarterback, and there's no guarantee that you will get your guy after number 2, which kind of leads me to believe that they will pick Shedeur Sanders here. There's definitely a world where they don't. I would not be that surprised that I'm making this prediction more so off of vibes and a gut feeling rather than rumors I'm seeing, because all the rumors suggest that Shedeur Sanders will not go this high or really anywhere near this high to begin with. But I think this is what the Browns are going to do. I'm going to stand on business here, and if I'm right, I'm going to laugh at everybody who said otherwise. And if I'm wrong, well, I wouldn't be that surprised, put it that way. That brings us to the Giants at number 3. I like that they have planned for the idea of not picking a quarterback. They don't have to force themselves into it by signing both Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. And in this scenario, they don't get to pick a quarterback at number 3 because they're both gone. So they're going to pick the best player on the board, and for me, that is Travis Hunter. Will he play corner? Will he play wide receiver? Will he play both? Who knows? But I'm willing to take that shot with him over any other player in this draft. And I think the Giants agree, especially having needs at both of those spots. Now, I do like what they did in the secondary. Paulson Adebo is an awesome player. Javon Holland is quite good as well. So you get those two. Drew Phillips entering his second year. He was quite good last year. Tyler Nubin was pretty solid last year. Deonte Banks, still an intriguing former first-round project. You are 4 deep at corner with guys who you're intrigued with. And then on the offensive side of the ball, him and Malik Neighbors sounds really, really exciting for whoever ends up throwing the ball here. So I think this is ultimately what the Giants would do in this scenario, and I think this would be a great move. Abdul Carter at number 4 to New England. I imagine the Patriots want to add to the offensive side of the ball, whether that's add to the offensive line or add a playmaker for Drake May. But when you're in the top 5, when you're one of the worst rosters in the NFL, you have to pick the best player available, especially when you don't need a quarterback and there's no one really looking to move up for one. It would feel like he makes the most logical sense here. Don't reach for a position that you need more. Don't force the wide receiver pick. Don't force the offensive line pick. You can get one in the second round. You can trade back up if you need to. I think in this spot, Abdul Carter would be their choice, and I think it would be the right decision. Jaguars at number 5. There have been some Jalen Walker smoke screens with this pick. Personally, I'm not buying it. I think they're trying to maybe bait someone like Carolina into moving up for him. I have them picking Mason Graham, the defensive lineman out of Michigan. Mason Graham in Jacksonville just feels like a really clean pairing to me, especially if the top 4 players off the board are the 2 quarterbacks, Hunter and Carter. Mason Graham, I think, is one of the safest players in this draft. You plug him in the middle of that defense. They picked Mason Smith in the 2nd round last year, who's got some upside. Trayvon Walker's here. He's cool. Obviously, Josh Hines-Allen is fantastic, along with some other solid players on that defensive line. You're building up the line of scrimmage. You're building up the trenches, which is, I think, what they want to do with their new GM, James Gladstone, and obviously the new head coach, Mr. Duval himself, Liam Cohen. Number 6, the Raiders. I had them picking Ashton Jeanty, the running back out of Boise State. It seems like ever since they traded for Geno Smith, this has been the pick for them for a lot of people, and I agree. I think it makes a lot of sense. They hit on Brock Bowers last year, but you still need more dynamic playmakers on that offense. Ashton Jeanty is one of the top running back prospects we have seen in quite a while, and I do not think it is a stretch to believe that he could go this early, especially in a draft that isn't necessarily super top-heavy. And when you have a prospect as good as him, who's clearly better than everybody else on the board, and it fits a need, I think it makes too much sense for the Raiders to pass up. You look at a guy in Pete Carroll who's not afraid to invest draft capital in the running back position. The general manager they got comes over from Tampa Bay. Obviously, we saw the value that Bucky Irving as a rookie brought to their offense a season ago. So I think it makes a lot of sense. I'd be surprised if he's on the board here that he would fall past number 6. Armin Membu goes to the Jets at number 7. They picked Olu Fashanu in the 1st round last year. He'll be your left tackle. Now you get your right tackle. Membu had a fantastic junior season last year with Missouri, skyrocketing up draft boards, and this pick makes a lot of sense to me. I think with his size, his length, his upside, he will be the first offensive lineman off the board, and I think the Jets will be a great pick. You plug him right in at right tackle where he is used to playing, and I think him and Fashanu can be a really darn good tackle duo for the future. Jalen Walker at number 8 to Carolina. He's one of the most polarizing players in this class because he could go this high. He could go as late as, I don't know, maybe the 20s. I mean, there's a lot of questions surrounding Jalen Walker because, well, where is he going to play? Do you trust him enough as an edge rusher? Do you trust him enough with his hand out of the dirt as a more traditional linebacker? Georgia used him in a variety of different ways last year, and I think when you look at the upside and when you look at a team like Carolina with a talented defensive coordinator in Ejiro Evero, I think he's really going to like the idea of having a versatile chess piece in Jalen Walker, who you can use in a multitude of different spots. The other guy I kind of thought about here, sort of in a similar realm as Walker, is Jihad Campbell from Alabama. I think a lot of people, probably myself included, would view Campbell as the better prospect, but I don't think he has the rushing upside as a pass rusher that, say, Jalen Walker does. And there have been some new medical rumors that have come out with Campbell. Mel Kiper saying he could slip out of the 1st round. I don't see that happening, but maybe not as high as some people have kind of been buzzing Campbell over the last month or so. And that's what leads me to kind of go full circle where we were in the last mock draft and still had this pick being Jalen Walker. At number 9, we've got the New Orleans Saints. This might be a little bit high for some people, but I had them picking the top receiver off the board, Matthew Golden, out of Texas. I think wide receiver is a sneaky need for the Saints. There's a lot of questions with Chris Olave. For one thing, his contract is almost up. Do you look to extend him? With the concussion issues, I wouldn't be surprised if the answer is no. I would understand if the Saints back off because of the medical. Regardless if Olave is in the future plans or not, this team needs another weapon, and I think rather than replacing Derek Carr, I think they will look to add to the offense for him. Matthew Golden had a fantastic year at Texas. The numbers don't necessarily pop off the page, but I think part of it is because the quarterback play was very meh at best for Texas this year with Quinn Ewers. Golden had a fantastic season. He was excellent in their biggest games when the lights were the brightest. He ran a super fast time at the combine, and I think when you look at that 4.3 40, good size, 6 foot, around 200 pounds, a little bit less than. He can win in the outside. He can win in the slot. He is dangerous with the ball after the catch. He can stretch the field vertically. I really feel like he's the total package at the wide receiver position, and I really don't have a problem with him being the top player at the position off the board. And I don't have a problem with him going in the top 10. I think this would be a perfectly fine pick here for New Orleans. Will Campbell goes to the Bears at number 10. Yes, they made a lot of additions to the offensive line, and it looks a lot better than it did last year. But it still would not hurt to add more. Look at a guy like Jonah Jackson, for instance. It's a solid pickup. He's, I guess, a capable starter, but is he really a long-term play for the Bears? You could have Campbell as a long-term option at guard. You could have him as a long-term option at left tackle. I would think they would try him at tackle until it doesn't work and then push him inside if you have to. They still have Braxton Jones at left tackle. They did draft Kieran Amagaji in the 3rd round last year, but I don't think he's stopping you from making this move here with Will Campbell, who makes it to the 10th pick. I think this would make a lot of sense for the Bears. Walter Nolan at number 11 out of Ole Miss to the 49ers. They need some more beef up front on both the offensive and defensive line. Walter Nolan is an extraordinarily talented player who I think is going to go earlier than people expect. The ceiling with him is just sky high, and he showed the flashes at a consistent level last year at Ole Miss, and the production was a lot better than it was prior at Texas A&M, which, as you'll notice, is pretty common for defensive linemen who played at Texas A&M and another school. There are some character questions with him I've seen which could push him a little bit farther than this, but if he passes everything for San Francisco, a team with an established culture, with guys who have played in big games, won big games, I think that he would be able to fit in pretty well, and I think the value here, again, would be perfectly fine. We finally have our first trade of the day at number 12. The Colts are moving up 2 spots with the Dallas Cowboys, sending away pick 117 and a 2026 fifth, along with, obviously, number 14. So the Colts are moving up for Tyler Warren, a player who could go higher than this. He's a very clean prospect. There's not many questions with him. The production, the athleticism, the character, it seems like it's really checking all the boxes for every team. And he could go higher than this, as high as, say, number 7 with the New York Jets. I have him here at 12, though. I think the Colts would really enjoy him with Shane Steichen, who's going to be able to use him in so many different ways. Tyler Warren lined up all over the field for Penn State, whether it's in the slot, in-line tight end, in the backfield as a running back, or even as a quarterback. I mean, he did everything for this offense. Think Taysom Hill, but if Taysom Hill was like an actually really, really good tight end, he's going to be a really fun player to watch. And I think for a Colts team who kind of needs a spark somehow, I think this can be their spark. Ballard and Steichen, I think those guys, their seats are getting warmer. I think they need to take a big swing. And I think Warren can be a big swing, but the floor is also so high because, again, he checks off so many boxes. Jahdae Barron at number 13 to the Dolphins. They probably should pick an offensive lineman here, but it's the Dolphins. They do not like investing in the offensive line. So Jahdae Barron is a fine secondary choice. He had a great season last year at Texas. Someone who primarily played on the outside at corner, but he can play in the slot, he can play in the box, he can play deep. He can play everywhere for the defense. I think kind of in the same realm as a guy like Brian Branch in Detroit. The Lions have used him in so many different ways, and he has been effective regardless of where he is on the field. I think Barron is someone who's probably going to be a little bit more traditionally away from the line of scrimmage compared to Branch, though. Might have some more snaps on the outside, but he's got inside-outside flexibility at corner, something that I do think the Dolphins value quite a bit, and I think this would be a strong pick for them. The Cowboys at number 14. Everyone's expecting an offensive playmaker here. Ted McMillan is on the board, Luther Burden is on the board, Emeka Ibuka is available, Marion Hampton would make a lot of sense. I had them going defense, though, at cornerback with Will Johnson. Not many people are expecting them to pick a corner in the first round, but I think it makes some sense. It seems like Trayvon Diggs' future here is a little bit murky. He's had some big injuries over the last couple of years. Deron Bland is on the last year of his deal. They're obviously paying a lot of guys a lot of money. CeeDee Lamb's contract is about to kick in. Dak Prescott's contract is about to kick in. They're going to have to pay Micah Parsons. And despite the rumors, I don't think it's much of the debate on whether or not they are going to do that. So because of that, I think Deron Bland becomes a little bit more expendable. A guy who didn't play until week 12 last year. He was good, but I think the Cowboys are not going to have as much problems letting him go compared to some of the other guys who, obviously, they are looking to pay. And regardless if they extend him or not, I think corner's a position they would look at anyway, given the questions with Trayvon Diggs' future. Will Johnson missed part of last year with an injury, but ever since his true freshman season, when the guy's been on the field, he has been a stud, and I think this will be a really good move for Dallas. Not only picking him, but moving back, adding multiple day 3 picks from Indianapolis in the process. Mike Green, the edge rusher out of Marshall, to the Falcons at number 15. Atlanta's a team who hasn't been afraid to add guys with questionable backgrounds, questionable pasts. And when you look away from the character stuff with Mike Green, This is a terrific football player. 17 sacks last year. Obviously played at a smaller school. But then in Mobile at the Senior Bowl against big school NFL prospects, he was one of the best players there. I think this makes a lot of sense for a Falcons team who's looking to add some pass rush. It's been offense for them early in drafts. I think they're finally going to look to take a swing on a potential number 1 edge rusher here with Mike Green. Number 16, we've got a trade, and it is a big one. The Browns are jumping all the way up from the first pick in the second round with the Arizona Cardinals to select Ted McMillan, the wide receiver out of Arizona. Now, as you can imagine, it's going to be a big price. The Cardinals will receive picks 33, 94, and a 2026 second rounder, while Cleveland adds 16 and 115 in the fourth. So the Browns are giving up 3 day 2 selections. Now, granted, they are getting a fourth as well, but it's a lot. Ted McMillan, though, gives them something that they don't already have in this offense. Cedric Tillman showed some good flashes last year, but he's not stopping you from giving your new quarterback a big vertical target who can go up and get it. He's a solid separator as well. Generally, when you have these big contested catch guys, he's not a great separator, but that's not really the case with Ted McMillan. He really moves well at his size. He's got great body control at 6'5", 210 plus pounds. I think this would be a really good move for the Cleveland Browns. Now, yes, they're giving up a lot, but I think adding him to this offense for Shedeur Sanders would be a lot of fun. I did have a hard time figuring out where McMillan is going to go because for some mock draft analysts, he's been going later in the first round. He probably still should be a top 10, top 12 pick, but for a lot of teams in that range, I felt like he was kind of their second choice. I figured at this point, someone's going to want to make up a move for him, and it ends up being Cleveland. At number 17, the Cincinnati Bengals select Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle out of Michigan. I think this is the same pick I gave them last time, if I remember correctly. Kenneth Grant is a monster. Terrific run defender, improving pass rusher. It's obvious the Bengals need more beef up front. They did draft his former Michigan teammate Chris Jenkins last year in the second round, a prospect who I was quite fond of. But regardless, they need help on the defensive line, and I think Kenneth Grant is a guy who can make an early impact for them. Gray Zabel, the offensive lineman out of North Dakota State to the Seahawks, another guy who has come from a small school but dominated at the Senior Bowl against big-time competition. He has experience at just about everywhere on the offensive line. He played left tackle last year, right tackle the year before, played 4 different positions in 2022, including center. So Seattle can put him wherever they want, which is helpful because, well, they could use practically 5 starters on the offensive line, it felt like. They need help in the worst way on the line, and you get a guy like Gray Zabel who can play pretty much every position at a high level. I think it makes a lot of sense for them. There's some people who think they might pick a receiver in the first round. I think that'd be a little bit of a waste when you have a guy like Zabel on the board. We have Jahad Campbell at number 19 to the Bucs. I would not be surprised if he goes earlier than this. I think he's better than 19th best prospect in the draft. But with the Bucs here, they're not afraid to invest in the linebacker position. It's something that they really care about. They've had Levante David there for over a decade. They used a top 5 pick on Devin White. They almost picked Jack Campbell in 2023. I think he was their backup choice to Kalijah Kancey, who they ended up picking. So the Bucs are a team who is more than fine using a first-round pick on a linebacker, and it's not a very well-kept secret that they really like Jahad Campbell, which makes a lot of sense. I think I had him mocked at 19 in my last mock draft. It feels like a very easy pairing of team and player. The only question I have is if he's going to be on the board for this, which I wouldn't be surprised if the answer is no. But this is ultimately how the board played out. I think the Bucs would be very excited if this is what ends up happening. Marion Hampton at number 20 to the Broncos. I think this is the floor for him. I don't think he gets past number 20. Would not be surprised if he goes earlier than this. Big physical runner, 6'1", 220 pounds. Over 3,100 rushing yards over the last 2 years at North Carolina. He's tough, he's physical, but he's also explosive as well. There has been some chatter that he could go really high. Think like Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs going in the top 12 picks. Hampton would be the Jahmyr Gibbs in the sense that it's a little bit of a surprise that he went that high, but he's certainly good enough, or at least I thought Jahmyr Gibbs was good enough, even though nobody else agreed with me, and here we are 2 years later. I was right about that. I definitely could see that, though, with Marion Hampton, him going as high as Maybe even number 12 to Dallas wouldn't even be a surprise, but I'm talking about like earlier. Like number 10 with the Bears, number 9 with New Orleans. Probably not higher than that. But I could see it with him in the top 10. With how the board plays out here, it doesn't happen, and Denver gets him at number 20. This feels like a really easy choice. Obviously, the running back position is very important in Sean Payton's offense. He likes running backs who can catch the ball, though, and when you have a powerful physical back like a Marion Hampton, generally they are not the greatest receivers in the world. Not the case with a Marion Hampton. He's a phenomenal pass-catching back as well. Another reason to think he could go in the top 10 because he's someone who you can put on the field on first, second, and third down. If this happens, I think Denver would be tickled pink to be able to land him at number 20. 21, we've got a trade. Kansas City is moving up 10 spots with the Steelers. They'll be giving away 31 and 63, their second rounder, for 21 and 185. Keep in mind the Chiefs have one of the top picks in the third round from Tennessee, thanks to the L'Jarius Sneed trade, which is kind of looking like a fleece in favor of the Chiefs. So they have 2 picks in that range. They can afford to package one, move up here, and get a blue chip, maybe not blue chip, but a super high level talent who they believe is probably one of the 10 best prospects in this draft. I really thought about Colston Loveland here. I think at some point they're going to look to replace Travis Kelce. He's getting older. He's on the verge of retirement. I feel like it's been 2 years in a row where we kind of expected him to go, and he doesn't, but it's going to happen soon. We saw a decline in play from him last year. He didn't look like the same guy out there, regular season and postseason. So it would not surprise me to see them make a big move for a super high-level tight end prospect like Colston Loveland, who could turn into a superstar in this system. But I don't have them doing that. Instead, I had them picking Simmons. That's because it's a deep tight end class. You can get one later. Probably the L'Jarius Sneed pick at 66 or whatever the exact number is. There's a lot of good players who could be there in that range. Harold Fannin, Mason Taylor, Terrence Ferguson. One of those guys is probably going to be there, so I think they can wait. What they cannot wait for, though, is a tackle prospect at the level of Josh Simmons. Before his injury last year, he was playing really, really well. And if not for the injury, there's a real shot he would go in the top 10. I think this is a great pick for Kansas City. The offensive line was obviously a weakness for them last year. They did draft Kingsley Suamataia in the second round last year. He was not particularly effective. I think they still obviously would look to develop him, whether it's as a tackle or as a guard, but he's not stopping you from making this move to get Josh Simmons. So with Colston Loveland still on the board, he ends up being the pick to the Chargers. A couple of the AFC West rivals could have thought about him. Denver at 20 as well would have made sense. They did sign Evan Engram. I don't think that would have prevented them from picking Loveland, who could certainly go earlier than this, but I think this works out pretty well for the Chargers. Jim Harbaugh gets this guy from Michigan, and they add a big-time weapon to the offense who can also block a little bit as well. Shamar Stewart goes to the Packers at number 23. Stewart feels like a Packers type of edge rusher in the sense that all the tools are there, a little bit raw in terms of production, but the upside is there. They did it a couple years ago in the first round with Lucas Van Ness, a pick that I think if they were to go back in time and do over, they probably would. Rashawn Gary as well, who did not have a very good season last year, but has been pretty solid in the past. Stewart is certainly an interesting case. It seems like a lot of people are down on him because of the production profile, which I understand that, but personally I would say I'm on team Shamar Stewart. When you look at someone who's 6'6", 290 pounds, who shows flashes of dominant reps, it's hard not to be excited about the upside. And as I mentioned with Walter Nolan, and we'll mention later with Nick Scorton, guys who have played at multiple schools, including Texas A&M, they were generally better at the other school. Nolan was better at Ole Miss. Scorton was better early in his career at Purdue before A&M made him bulk up. Fadil Diggs, a possible top 100 pick, was better last year at Syracuse than prior at A&M. So with all that being accounted for, I think you kind of have to make a pass for Stewart's production. He's a good run defender. He can play in multiple different schemes. He was still amongst the team. I think he was first on the team in terms of pressures. So this is a guy who can get to the quarterback. He just can't consistently finish sacks. I'm usually a little bit wary of edge rushers with this production profile. I was wary of Trayvon Walker when he came out. And to be honest, I think I was kind of right. I feel like NFL fans have kind of overrated him. But regardless, I would be willing to take the shot on Stewart here if I'm Green Bay at number 23. And then we've got another trade at 24. The Minnesota Vikings have, I think 4 picks this year. Maybe not 4. No, I think it actually is 4. It's not a lot, put it that way. They're going to move down here with the Raiders, adding picks 37, 68, and 180. So a 2, a 3, and another day 3 pick for 24. The Raiders already added Ashton Jeanty, but they're not done, adding some weaponry to the offense for Geno Smith, as they're going to pick Luther Burden, the wide receiver out of Missouri. Disappointing junior season, but I think teams are going to be willing to look past that because of the production he showed as a sophomore and then the inconsistent quarterback play that the Tigers had a season ago. Primarily a slot receiver, I think he can play on the outside, but I think he'll be effective in the slot. We saw the connection that Geno Smith was able to build with Jackson Smith and Jigba in the slot last year, and I think the Raiders and Pete Carroll, who was in the draft room to pick JSN, are going to see a similar idea with picking Luther Burden here. Burden and Jeanty joining this offense with Brock Bowers, with Jacoby Myers, who I think is one of the more underrated receivers in the league. That's a scary group of weapons for Geno Smith, who the Raiders are paying to be their long-term guy, or at least long-term is in the next 5 years. I think Geno Smith is one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the NFL. The guy can friggin' sling the ball. And when you give him these types of weapons to work with, if the Raiders are able to play up to their ceiling, this is a team who absolutely could contend for a wild card spot. Now it's going to be a challenge in the AFC West, which might be the best division in the league next year. But this offense all of a sudden becomes extremely frightening. I think this would be a home run first round for the Raiders. I think it's pretty obvious the Texans are going to go to the offensive side of the ball here in the first round, whether it's wide receiver or offensive line. It was hard to watch their pass protection, though, last year. C.J. Stroud never really stood a chance. So I think picking Josh Conerly here makes a lot of sense. I don't think he's the most polished of the first-round tackles this year. Maybe they would rather a guy like Kelvin Banks, who I think sets the floor a little bit higher and gives you a little bit more consistency right off the bat. I would be okay with that. But Conerly was a former high recruit who's gotten better and better each year at Oregon. Very solid athletically. I think he'll fit the offense pretty well. And you look at a guy who, considering his linear development and linear growth, there's no reason to think that won't continue in the NFL, and he'll continue to develop and be a really good player, replacing Laramie Tunsil at left tackle. Number 26, this is where things get fun. This is my boldest take of the entire draft. I had the Rams picking Jackson Dart, quarterback out of Ole Miss. So this is certainly an interesting one because there's been no buzz around the Rams, of all teams, picking a quarterback in the first round. Would not surprise me at all if they go in another direction. This is a team who's not far off from being amongst the best teams in the NFC. And if they feel like there's a guy who they feel like can be one of their missing pieces, I wouldn't be surprised if that's what they're going to do. However, I think it's highly likely that they pick a quarterback here, and I have connected the dots as to why this will happen. So let's fast forward around a month and a half ago when Matthew Stafford signed his contract extension with the Rams. There was a lot of rumors going around that he could have been traded. The Raiders were in the mix. The Giants were in the mix. And from what I know, it seemed like the Rams had agreed to compensation with the Giants to potentially make a deal, but then they were able to figure out the contract stuff. And what, are you going to say no to bringing back a fringe top 5 quarterback on one of the best teams in the NFC? Like, obviously, that's what the Rams are going to prefer to do. But with that being the case and their willingness to trade him away, that suggests, knowing Sean McVay, knowing Les Snead, knowing that this is one of the smartest organizations in the league, that they have a plan post-Matthew Stafford. And I'll tell you what, that plan is not currently on their roster right now. So it would be some kind of move they would make. Now, the one idea against this would be that their plan would have been to sign a free agent, particularly somebody like Justin Fields, who's young enough and has enough potential to where, in a McVay system, maybe he becomes really solid. That could have been the case, and if it was, then this whole hypothesis is off. But if that's not the case, then I would imagine there's a college prospect that McVay really likes. And I think it very well could be Jackson Dart. I think he could fit really well in this system. Obviously, you don't have to rush him because you have Matthew Stafford, who you hope is going to give you another year or two of development. And even good teams have shown, like, if you have an older quarterback, look at the Packers in 2020. They were a contender. I think that was right after they were the number 1 seed, if I remember correctly, and Aaron Rodgers was still playing at MVP level. They traded up for Jordan Love in the first round, and Jordan Love isn't like some star, but I think the Packers are quite happy with that move. I see something kind of similar here with the Rams and Jackson Dart. Now, I will say personally, I would not pick Dart in the first round. I don't think he's that caliber of prospect, and I hold him a lot closer to the next cluster of quarterbacks, such as Tyler Shuck, Jalen Milroe, Kyle McCord. So I would rather wait until later in the draft. The Rams don't have a second, though, keep in mind, so that's another reason to think they wouldn't pick one in the second round because they don't have one. Overall, it's certainly a hot take. The likelihood of this happening is low, but I'm going to call my shot. I think the Rams pick Jackson Dart in the first round if he's available, and I think he will be. All right, let's move forward now. The Ravens at 27 pick Malachi Starks, safety out of Georgia, one of the better pure football players in the draft, and Baltimore likes guys who can play football at a high level, let me tell you. Malachi Starks is a guy who plays a variety of different spots, played a bunch of snaps as a deep traditional cover safety, played over 200 snaps last year in the box, played over 250 snaps in the slot last year. Georgia's lined him up all over the place, and I think we could see teams overthink it because he hasn't played a clear position, and his position isn't necessarily valuable. The Ravens will gladly take advantage because, again, the guy's a damn good football player, and him on that defense would be really fun. Mykel Williams out of Georgia goes to the Lions here at number 28. He's an interesting player because this is a former five-star recruit who obviously has the NFL size, the NFL measurables to be really good. Missed some time last year with injury. When he was on the field, though, he was quite solid. You're not drafting him, though, for the production, sort of like Shamar Stewart, but you're drafting him for the physical tools that he brings. He's already a good run defender. I think the Lions are going to like that. He's a guy who they'd be able to kind of switch around on their defensive line. I think similar versatility to Josh Paschal, who they drafted in the second round a few years ago, who's okay, but he's never really fully panned out. So I think Mykel Williams is a guy who would really fit this defense. I think Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes would really like him, and I think the value here would be pretty appropriate. Donovan Ezaraku to the Commanders at number 29. He's an interesting player because he's certainly a lower percentile player in terms of size. He's not the biggest, 6'2", around 250 pounds, and he doesn't necessarily have the explosiveness that you normally see with players of that size. The Eagles drafted Nolan Smith in the first round a few years ago, undersized edge rusher, but he is explosive. He is an elite athlete, and after some growing pains, we saw him really turn it on down the stretch, and he was one of the best players on the field during their playoff games last year. So with a guy who doesn't have elite size, doesn't have elite athleticism, you're thinking, why is he going in the first round? Well, Ezaraku's production is off the charts. 14 sacks last year at Boston College. The floor with him is really high. He has a variety of different pass rush moves. Smart player who I think would fit this Washington scheme well. And I think he's a guy who'd be able to get them some production early on as a rookie. Nick Emanwari to the Bills at number 30. The Combine darling who I had in the first round before the Combine. Gonna give myself a little pat on the back there. I don't really think he raised his stock that much during the Combine because everyone expected him to be a freak. Maybe not as good as he was, but there was a high expectation to begin with, which is why I made the projection to push him into the first round. I think it was number 30 with the Bills, so I'm gonna stick with this pick. A little bit raw. I think there's some work to do with him, but he's a guy similar to Malachi Starks who can play in the slot, who can play in the box, who can play back deep. I think the Bills would figure out a way to use him because they know how to work with versatile defensive players, and I think the value here would be fine. Derek Harmon to the Steelers at number 31. You might not think of defensive line as their top need, but Cameron Hayward, as good as he was last year, not getting any younger. The guy's been in the league since 2011. I think adding another piece up front to develop behind him and eventually play alongside, say, Keanu Benton would make a lot of sense. Obviously, the Steelers need a quarterback. I am under the assumption that they will sign Aaron Rodgers, and maybe they look at a guy in the second or third round. They could pick an offensive skill position player here. I think that's in play. Wide receiver could have been a possibility. Now I don't think so with DK Metcalf. Running back is a possibility. Marion Hampton obviously didn't fall to them in the first round. So they're going to focus on the trenches here, and I think Derek Harmon would be a solid pick. And then Nick Scorton, wrapping up the first round to the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. Scorton bulked up last year at A&M. His production was not what it was previously at Purdue. I would imagine he's going to slim back down, and I think he'd be a good fit for an Eagles team who lost both Josh Sweat and Milton Williams, so they could pick a more traditional edge rusher. They could pick a more traditional defensive lineman. Scorton can do both, which is why I think he would make sense at 32. Into the second round now. Cardinals fans, I'm sorry for keeping you guys on your toes for so long. I do have some good news, though. Arizona might not be done dealing. Hint, hint. We'll start at number 33. They pick Azareye'h Thomas, the corner out of Florida State. I think they've got some good talent at corner. Garrett Williams looks like a hit in the third round a couple years ago. Max Melton is an intriguing prospect from the second round last year. Their investment, though, in the cornerback position shows me that they want to get this position right. And I think Thomas will be a solid pick here early in round 2. I think we're going to see a run on corners at some point. Plenty of talented day 2 guys at that spot. I think Thomas would be a good pick, though. A guy who's risen up boards during the pre-draft process. In my last mock, I actually had him in the first round. Here he ends up being the first player off the board in the second round. Kelvin Banks finally off the board. He takes a little bit of the tumble, the tackle out of Texas. I think he's a good prospect. I'm not sure if he's going to go as high as people think. He is coming off a strong season, though, and I think the Giants would be more than happy to add him to the offensive line here at pick 34. Where is he going to play? I don't know, because obviously Andrew Thomas is already established at left tackle. I think he has guard flexibility and could start at guard if they want. Could slide over to right tackle. So the choices with him are kind of endless in that sense. At number 35, the Titans pick Emeka Egbuka. They need wide receiver really bad. That room is not pretty. They've got to give Cam Ward some weapons, and Egbuka is a really good one. Certainly could have gone in the first round, but he falls a little bit into the early second. He just doesn't necessarily have the upside that maybe some of the other receivers do. But for a Titans team who's looking to get a guy who's going to be able to be a consistent slot option right away, I think him and Cam Ward would be a pretty fun duo together. Jacksonville at 36 might be a surprise pick for some. I have them going Kevin Winston Jr., the safety out of Penn State, a guy who's not really getting any buzz this high. But he was going into the year. He had a terrific campaign in 2023. And then this year he barely played. He only played 2 games before suffering a season-ending injury against Bowling Green. So I feel like his stock has kind of moved down, but it really shouldn't have because the guy barely played. In 2023, he was terrific. Really good deep cover safety. He can play a few different spots. Another very versatile guy. And the torn ACL should be better by the time we get to the early portion of the season. And even if it's not, Jacksonville's a team who can afford to be patient with him. They just lost Andre Sisco in free agency to the Jets, so this would be a really good replacement. And I think Mason Graham and Kevin Winston as the top 2 picks would be a home run start for general manager James Gladstone. The Vikings moved down earlier with the Raiders. I had them picking TreVeyon Henderson, the running back from Ohio State. There's a lot of early buzz with him. Some people think he could go in the first round. I saw a mock draft the other day with him going at number 10 to the Bears, which I can't say I would go that far. But I do think he could go in the early portion of the second round. The guy averaged 7 yards a carry this year at Ohio State. He was terrific as a senior. One of the biggest reasons why they won the national title. Could have been a somewhat high pick last year, but he wanted to return to school, help the Buckeyes win a championship while simultaneously improving his draft stock, and that's exactly what he did. High character kid who I think Minnesota is going to really like. I think him and Aaron Jones are going to be a good duo. Jones was pretty solid last year, but it seemed like he kind of wore down as the season went on. So to have a young running back who can keep his legs fresh and then I would think at some point be the main guy, I think this would make a lot of sense for Minnesota. I don't think they have to necessarily look at a premium position because they've invested so much on the offensive and defensive line through free agency. Maybe they go secondary here. Cam Bynum, losing him is obviously a big deal, but I think they need more juice at the running back position, and TreVeyon Henderson would be a great pick. Ariante Ursary, the tackle out of Minnesota to New England. They picked Abdul Carter at number 4, but here you go. In the second round, you can go a little bit more needs-based. I really like the tackle crop on day 2. Ursary's a good player. You've got guys like Donovan Green, Marcus Mbo, Jonas Savaiinaya. I think all of those guys are really, really strong prospects. They're going to go with Ursary here, a guy who was hyped as a first-rounder going into the year. A little bit up and down as the season went along, but he played well, I think, for the most part, to still warrant a top 40 pick. And I like this selection a lot for New England. Get a guy who can be the blindside blocker for Drake May. The fall for James Pierce comes to a close. I have him at number 39 to the Chicago Bears, another team who I think won't be scared to pick him, despite some of the character questions. And when you look at players with character concerns, they generally fall under one of 2 bubbles. You have the guys who are like criminals, or at least alleged criminals in the case of like Mike Green and Maxwell Harrison, who have sexual assault allegations against them. And then you have the second bubble of players who are not necessarily bad people, but their football character comes into question. Is this a guy who's going to buy in, who's going to put in the work to become really good? And I think that's the bubble where teams are concerned that James Pierce is going to fall under. Now, I don't want to make unfair claims against him because I don't know this kid personally, but seeing some of the talk around him suggests that the football character is low, even if he's not necessarily a bad kid. And I think for some NFL organizations, fair or unfair, they're going to be a little bit more scared of that than a sexual assault allegation. I'm not saying I agree with that way of thinking in any way, but I think that's how some teams would think. Nonetheless, it's also obvious that he's an extremely talented football player. He was a guy in the conversation to be the number one pick going into the year, and he wasn't as good as a junior, but he was still quite solid, and I think that's going to keep him in the top 40 picks because, well, the guy is a stud. I think the Bears, though, would be willing to take the risk. They could use a secondary edge rusher to pair with Montez Sweat. They have another pick coming up fairly soon. So I think they're a team who hasn't necessarily shied away from taking character risks in the past, and I think they could do it again here. Jordan Burch to the Saints at number 40. Missed some time with an injury this year for Oregon. When he was healthy, though, he was really, really good. 10 sacks this year for the Ducks. A versatile player who can line inside and out at 6'6", 295 pounds. The Saints really like those bigger edge rushers. Cameron Jordan, obviously, has made a whole career out of it. But the Saints have prioritized that type of player when drafting defensive linemen in the past. I think Jordan Burch will be next up. Now, I will say they've missed on a lot of high defensive line picks over the years. Marcus Davenport in the top half of the first round. Now, granted, he's not that bad of a player, but the pick was a miss. Peyton Turner in the first round was a big whiff. Isaiah Foskey in the second round looks like a big whiff. I think Jordan Burch, though, will change that. I think he's a really good prospect, and I think this will be a nice draft for the Saints. Many people think they'd be overdrafting with both Matthew Golden and Jordan Burch. I don't think so. I think this would be a good first and second round for New Orleans. At number 41, I've got the Cardinals moving up. They traded down earlier, and they're going to package some picks to move up here to number 41 with the Bears. So Arizona's going to get 41 and a 2026 7th, while the Bears will get 47, 152, and a 2026 5th. So they move up into day 3 next year. They add a day 3 pick this year, and they only go down 6 spots. The Cardinals, meanwhile, are moving up for Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State. He's sort of a nose tackle type, and remember, Jonathan Gannon was in the building when the Eagles drafted Jordan Davis. The Cardinals lost Roy Lopez in free agency to Detroit, so he becomes their natural replacement. I could see him going earlier than this, but he ends up falling a little bit, and the Cardinals take advantage as they swoop up and get him. Pun intended, I guess, because, a Cardinal's a bird. Jaden Higgins goes to the Jets at number 42. I think he's a really good player. The Jets need some more receiver help. Garrett Wilson, if you guys have followed me for a while, you know how I feel about Garrett Wilson. I think he's awesome. But they need some more guys around him because it's going to be easy to focus the entire attention around Garrett Wilson defensively. And then who else is Justin Fields going to be able to throw the ball to? Now you add a legit number 2, in my opinion, with Jaden Higgins. 6'4", 215. A lot of these big guys don't necessarily have diverse route trees. He does. He can run pretty much any route that you need him to. 1,100 yards last year. This is a guy who's going to be able to give you a physical presence on the outside, and I think he could be a really, really good pro here at the next level. Trey Amos to the Niners at number 43. They doubled down on Ole Miss defenders. It was Walter Nolan in the first round, and now Amos here in the second. He had a fantastic 2024 senior season for the Rebels. He's got the size you look for, 6'1", 190. He has really good lateral movement skills at the cornerback position. I think the floor of him is really high. He's going to be good right off the bat, and he'll be a strong replacement for Charvarius Ward, who obviously left for the Colts. The Cowboys finally pick a fun offensive skill position player. Quinshon Judkins is the selection. They let go of Rico Dowdle. They replaced him with Javonte Williams, which I would argue is a downgrade. Nonetheless, though, I think pairing Williams with Judkins would make a lot of sense. 6 foot, 220 pounds. Judkins has good size, good explosiveness. Obviously, we saw what he can do in a tandem with Trevion Henderson. The two of those guys were both fantastic. Henderson already off the board. The Cowboys need a dynamic running back. This offense is at their best when they have high production at that position, and they haven't since Ezekiel Elliott was at the peak of his powers. Now they finally invest in the running back position. It seems like we've been begging them to do this for years now. They finally get it done with Quinshon Judkins. I think this would make a lot of sense. Tyler Booker, how is he still on the board at number 45 to the Colts? They lost Will Fries, who ended up signing with the Vikings in free agency. This would be a steal. What a draft for the Colts. Tyler Warren and Tyler Booker would be an outstanding use of Indianapolis' first and second rounders. This would be a home run. Savon Revel to the Falcons at number 46. Very well could have gone in the first round if not for the ACL injury pretty early in the season. 6'3", 190 pounds. You do not find corners with his size and length very often. Highly productive in 2023. It was really good in 2024 before the injury. I can't see him falling much later than this. Would be a steal for the Falcons at 46. This is an interesting pick at 47. I don't think I've ever seen this player mocked this high, but I'm going to need you to hear me out. R.J. Harvey, the running back out of UCF, is the choice for the Bears. He had a really good season with the Knights, nearly 1,600 yards. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. I think the Bears are going to be looking for their Jahmyr Gibbs type. He's not Jahmyr Gibbs. Let's get that out of the way. But the Bears, I think, are definitely going to invest in a running back sooner rather than later. Ben Johnson, I know, is not a huge fan of DeAndre Swift. I saw it in 2022 with the Lions. I imagine it will be the case again here with the Bears. Another guy I thought about here is Bashul Tutin. Might be a bit early for him. Now, hint, hint, I will have him in the second round as well. But I think R.J. Harvey is really good. The guy can flat out play. I don't think this would be too early at all. I think he's awesome. Marcus Mbo goes to the Dolphins at number 48, a guy who's a little bit small. I think you could certainly look to move him into guard. They'll probably try him at tackle first. The Dolphins need both positions, so you're probably going to fill a need with Marcus Mbo. It's more so a question of which need will it be. I think he could go earlier than this. He's one of those guys who no one really expects would end up in the first round. If he does, it wouldn't entirely surprise me, but he makes it here to the middle of the second round. I think this would be a good choice for the Dolphins. Carson Schweisinger, the linebacker out of UCLA to the Bengals. Feels like only a matter of time until Jermaine Pratt is gone. I think they could look to replenish and replace him. 6'2", 225 pounds. He's a little bit small, but we're seeing that become more of the mold for off-ball linebackers in the NFL. Really talented player and a very strong season this year with UCLA. He's effective as a rusher. He's effective in run defense. He's effective in coverage. He can do a little bit of everything, and I think that's what the Bengals are going to really like about him. Donovan Jackson to the Seahawks. I said earlier, just because they picked one offensive lineman doesn't mean they're going to stop. It's a huge need for them. Donovan Jackson, I think, makes a lot of sense. Tackle, guard, flexibility. Just like Gray Zabel, you're getting a guy who is super versatile. You don't really know where he's going to end up, but you hope he'll start somewhere on the offensive line, and it's nice that he can play multiple positions. Jackson has a lot of experience at guard, but he moved over to tackle last year once Josh Simmons got injured, and he did really well. So he's played at a high level at both spots, and I think Seattle is going to like that. We've got a deal here at 51. The Lions are not afraid to move up and get their guys. They're doing that here with the Broncos, trading pick 60, 102, and a 2026 fourth for 51, 122, and 208. It's a lot for the Lions, but I think they're okay giving up that compensatory third rounder that they got with Aaron Glenn going to the Jets. They're also a team who doesn't shy away from trading future picks away. So I think they'd be okay dealing that 2026 fourth. They're moving up for Jonah Savaiinaea, a guy who I think the Lions do like quite a bit. Another player with tackle, guard, flexibility. You definitely are going to want to try to develop him at tackle, though, because he's got the size to do it. 6'5", 335 pounds. He's played left tackle. He's played right tackle. He's played right guard. He's played a lot of positions with a lot of snaps on that Arizona offensive line. So I think the idea here is that he probably would not start as a rookie. I mean, maybe he would compete for one of the guard spots, but the hope is that he'd be the long-term replacement for Taylor Decker, who did just get an extension, but I think he also took a slight step back a year ago. The Lions are also developing Gio Manu in the wings. I think they like him quite a bit. Fourth rounder last year, who's really raw but has a high ceiling. We'll see if Savaiinaea can get one of those guard spots. I kind of think the two starters would be Glasgow and Christian Mahogany, who I'm really excited about. He looked good in limited reps last year But maybe Savaiinaea takes Graham Glasgow's spot. That would certainly be the hope, with the idea that maybe he sticks at guard long term, or he eventually replaces Taylor Decker at left tackle. Alec Eomanor goes to the Seahawks at number 52. Big-bodied physical receiver, and what I like most about this pick for Seattle is that he can really block. And, well, as we've talked about earlier, they need guys who can block. But he also gives them a big-bodied perimeter threat. They, of course, need that quite a bit. They add Cooper Kupp, who's quite good, but him and Jackson Smith-Njigba are primary slot receivers. They need to add a big physical target on the outside. They did sign Marquez Valdes-Scantling, but I would say he's more of a field stretcher, per se, who opens up things in the short game because he can get open vertically. Eomanor is 6'2", 210. I think he plays bigger than his size suggests, though, and I think the fit with Seattle would be a really good one. Darius Alexander to the Bucs at 53. He is an older prospect. I think he's already 25 years old, I want to say. A little bit of a late bloomer, but he had a really good season this year with Toledo. Good run defender, improving pass rusher. The Bucs are a team who's always investing on the defensive line. They're always replenishing bodies there, and I think Alexander would be the next on the list. Benjamin Morrison goes to the Packers at 54. Very similar case to Savon Revel. It seems like the injuries with him have a little bit more long-term question marks, which is why he's pushed a little bit farther. But the guy, when he's been healthy, has been really good. He was very solid in 2023, very solid in 2022 as a true freshman. And when he played this year, he was pretty good. So he's a first-round caliber player who just needs to be able to stay on the field. The Packers, they need corner. They let go of Eric Stokes. I mean, I don't think they were that sad to let him go. Jair Alexander is probably gone at some point as well. They did add Nate Hobbs. He's a guy with inside-out flexibility. I think they want to develop someone, though, as a true traditional outside corner, and that's what Benjamin Morrison can do. Josiah Stewart out of Michigan to the Chargers. Jim Harbaugh gets another one of his guys. Stewart's a little bit undersized, 6'1", 245, but whatever I hear about him, it's that he's always one of the toughest guys in that program. He just screams Jim Harbaugh, and I think he would be very excited to get his guy back here in the second round. The Chargers could use some more talent up front going after the quarterback. Maxwell Hairston to the Bills at 56, tore up the combine. Some off-field questions with him, missed some time this year, but this is a guy who knows how to play the football. He had 5 interceptions in 2023. 3 of them he took to the house. So, as we saw at the Combine, the guy is lightning fast, extremely athletic, and he's got the size to really develop into a good player. 6'1", a little bit under 190 pounds. I think he's a little bit more raw, though, than people think, and he wasn't that impressive in 2024, but I think someone's still going to take a shot on him sooner rather than later, and that team here will be the Buffalo Bills. Wrapping things up now, I've got the Panthers picking Jalen Noel, the wide receiver from Iowa State. Second Cyclone receiver off the board here in the second round. A little bit smaller than his teammate Jaden Higgins, 5'11", 200 pounds. But this is a guy who I think can play in the slot. He can win on the outside as well. The Panthers have some talent at this position. Obviously, Adam Thielen is quite good. He'll be a nice mentor. Xavier Legette was a little disappointing as a rookie, but showed some good things. Jalen Coker, Holy Cross's finest, looks like a major late gem for this team. I think they still need to add another guy, though. I think Noah would be a solid pick. Houston, number 58, gets Jalen Royals, the receiver out of Utah State. The Texans need some more help at the wide receiver position. Stephon Diggs is gone. That pickup didn't really work out, largely because he got hurt. Tank Dell's future is in question because of his leg injury from last year against Kansas City. They need to add another threat on this offense for C.J. Stroud. I think Nico Collins is awesome. I think he's a top 5 receiver in the league right now, but he can't do it all on his own. And I think Jalen Royals would be a solid pick here. Landon Jackson to the Ravens at number 59. Baltimore loves their edge rushers with size, length, explosiveness, athleticism. That's Landon Jackson for you. His athletic ability at 6'7", 280 is frightening to think about. Had a solid season this year with Arkansas. I would pick him earlier than this. I think the upside that he has is really something. If anyone's able to tap that out of him, though, it's definitely the Baltimore Ravens. At number 60, Savion Williams goes to the Denver Broncos. He's an interesting one. I really like the fit because he's going with Sean Payton, a guy who knows how to use versatile offensive players. Williams is a little bit raw as a receiver, but he's dangerous with the ball in his hands. 6'5", 225, players of his skill set generally are not that big, which makes me excited about the potential with him. He's a guy who can line up in the backfield, can line up out wide. I don't know exactly what his long-term role would be, but if there's anyone who's going to get the most out of him, I think it's Sean Payton. Bashal Tutin to the Commanders at 61. A lot of people don't really have him in the second round, but his explosiveness is really special, and that's what this Commanders team is kind of missing in the backfield. Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler, they play to their role, but they're missing juice at the running back position, and Bashal Tutin is going to give them exactly that. Maybe it's a little early, but I think the fit makes a lot of sense. The Giants are moving up 3 spots to the end of the second round with the Bills. They want to make sure they get ahead of the Steelers here, sending away 65 and 105 for picks 62 and 132. The player they're moving up for is Tyler Shough, quarterback out of Louisville. I don't think people would expect him to be the next quarterback off the board. I think most would say probably Jalen Milroe, maybe Kyle McCord, maybe someone else. I think it could be Tyler Shough, though. He's certainly fascinating because he's 25. He was recruited to Oregon, I think, the same year that Penei Sewell was. So, yeah, he's been around for a while. Played at 3 different schools, started at Oregon, then Texas Tech, then Louisville. He played really well, though, for the Cardinals this year, and despite the age, despite the injury concerns as well, that's another thing with Shough that could take some teams away. But I think he's probably the most pro-ready quarterback on the board, at least in terms of what he'll be able to provide in terms of production. We'll see what happens medically. But I think when you look at a Giants team who has the GM and the head coach sitting in hot water, if they don't take massive strides this year, both of those guys are gone. And that starts at the quarterback position. And I think the hope here would be that at some point this year, Tyler Shough takes over the starting position and is good enough to where he looks like he can be the long-term quarterback. Whether he is or not is one thing. But if the Giants feel like he can be the guy, then Shane is going to stick around and Daboll's going to stick around for the foreseeable future. So that's why I think Tyler Shough with the Giants could really happen. Xavier Watts to the Steelers at 63. Highly productive player, high football character. He is a really, really good cover safety, knows how to find the football. He can play a bunch of different positions. He isn't necessarily some elite athlete, but you're getting a guy who has been ultra productive for the Irish for a while now, and I think he would be a guy who Mike Tomlin would really like coaching. And then at number 64, the Eagles picking Harold Fannin Jr., one of the more fascinating players in this class. On one hand, I mean, the guy's a very productive receiver. He caught 117 balls for 1,500 yards this year. On the other hand, he is quite stiff. The way he moves like my grandmom sometimes. But he's, despite that, still pretty dynamic with the ball in his hands. He's a really polarizing player, and again, if anyone's going to make the most out of him, I think it would be the Philadelphia Eagles. Dallas Goedert is a really good pass catcher. I don't think Dallas Goedert's going to stick around forever, though. I don't think the Eagles want to give him another extension. He has a history of injuries. The Eagles were able to use Goedert in a few different ways, and I think they could with Harold Fannin as well. I think he's going to be extremely versatile. You can line him out wide at receiver, put him in line at tight end, hell, maybe even put him at fullback. I think the Eagles would have a lot of fun being able to use him creatively, and that adds another unique element to the offense who already has all pro level skill position players. So that's going to wrap up this video. Let me know which picks you liked and did not like down below in the comments. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.